Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks.
Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try to make your world a little weirder. I'm Niall.
And I'm Kyle. And this week we're gonna dial it back. This is the first It Gets Weird ASMR episode.
Oh, has it now been long enough since that was relevant that we can do it?
Well,
we're always so far fucking behind.
I'm just sad that we'll never have the ASMR speedrun world record. But that's a video that people should look up.
Oh yeah,
you sent this to me, I think, and it's still one of the funnier YouTube videos I've seen of a guy doing a did he call it a speedrun? ASMR speedrun?
Fastest
ASMR?
Yeah, something like that. And at one point he just starts doing a bunch of gun noises. It's really something.
It's awesome. He's just kind of, he looks like he's casting spells and he sounds like he's casting spells. It's really something else. Look it up.
I think he can best be summarized as someone that you would not be surprised to see wearing an airbrushed Jared Leto Joker shirt.
Yeah.
So imagine that guy doing a
Absolutely.
lot of very, very fast ASMR noises and gun noises, which I didn't know guns were part of ASMR. But there you go.
Certain, it takes all kinds. And no, this episode just kind of at a certain point was sort of an ASMR experience for me. This doing the quote unquote research for this episode was a sort of like that for me. We did watch a documentary this week, and I want to get into that. But I also wanted to mention that there's another really funny ASMR video that I saw relatively recently where it's just this woman. She's trying to eat like cheesy like noodles. Like a giant plate, or maybe it's like Alfredo. I don't remember. Kind of irrelevant for my purposes. But she's like, we're gonna eat this delicious bowl of creamy Alfredo, and she starts talking and doing, and the mic is sensitive in the way that it'll, you can really hear her voice, and it's really, it's the classic ASMR stuff. But then you hear from clearly like nearby off camera, her child just start yelling nonsense. And she does she closes her eyes. I think she counts up from one and stuff. And she's just featuring my son. And it's you kind of got to see it.
Okay.
But that's my recommendation to everybody this week. Check out fastest ASMR ever, speedrun, whatever it is. You'll know it when you see it. This guy, it's undeniable that this is the fastest ASMR in the world. But then look up creamy Alfredo ASMR. Look for this woman. I promise it's I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one who would find that funny. Anyways,
I'll figure it out.
Speaking of niche, I don't really even know how to tie this in. ASMR is not a fetish, right? Is it like a fetish?
I mean, look, everything can be. That's the thing is
true.
you can sexualize anything you want to.
True.
So there are people that are into ASMR purely as kind of a calming relaxation thing, but then there are probably also people that will jerk off to it, and like that's fine.
Yeah, look, none of this is coming from a judgy place. I just it's occurring to me, or it has occurred to me before. Maybe this is something that people are into in that way. But speaking of fetishes, we did get an email, which I don't know. Maybe this will just be my legacy, but the bringing up all the kink and fetish stuff from that episode a couple episodes ago, I mean, it triggered a couple emails to be sent in to us.
Cool.
So this one says, this one's from Kat, and it says, "Hi, Kyle and Niall. I was just listening to episode 451, and the discussion of silly food transformation kink art reminded me of something I saw on Tumblr a while ago. One of my friends used to reblog posts from a blog that shared hilariously weird niche DeviantArt fetish content. I think I may have followed that same blog. This is how I learned about the cheese transformation kink DeviantArt community. I don't remember if it was just one person or a group of like-minded cheese fuckers. The art was stock images of cheese wheels with stock images of people's faces edited onto them. This is hands down the funniest kink I've ever heard of, and I thought you guys should be cursed with the knowledge of it. DeviantArt truly is one of the places of all time. Thanks for making your weird show, Kat." I have to say, this is not a curse, but rather a blessing for me. And I've not seen the cheese fucker stuff, but I love it conceptually. And I might have to go see if I can track down what they're talking about.
Where is that thing? There's somewhere in, I think, Europe where a local tradition is you like roll cheese wheels down a hill.
Oh.
And it's like a town-wide competition.
Yeah.
So I'm just imagining that festival crossed over with cheese transformation. And like that's like an AO3 right there. That's a fucking that's a fic topic. Feel free, anyone who's into that, feel free to write that up. Send the link directly to Kyle,
please.
And we'll check it out.
You can reach out to me with that information. Niall, though, I will point out that is a slightly dangerous crossover, because you're going to wind up with somebody with their dick in the cheese wheel, and they're going to get pushed down the hill, and they're going to be rolling, and their dick's going to be trapped in that thing. They're going to just go tumbling down with it. So we just have to. So there's going to have to be some safety guidelines for the cheese fucker.
You go directly to people sticking their dicks in these wheels of cheese. Do you think that's actually the thing? Because like a lot of these transformation things, it's about the physical transformation and not the like typical cishet idea of P and V sex, you know?
Okay, first of all, I don't like your tone to me. Second of all, I knew that. I guess the thing that I was trying to do is make a joke.
I mean, it is funny to think of someone getting stuck in there just going, wow, you went like rolling down the hill, you know?
Yeah,
the little Doppler effect
That's
action.
What I'm saying.
Yeah. But
Doppler effect.
But yeah, it's just I was more worried about masochists transforming into a wheel of cheese and getting rolled down a hill, and like getting those bumps and bruises and stuff would fuel them both ways.
That's true. I guess if you happen to be the very niche person who has the masochist thing and also has the cheese wheel thing, and also is just overtaken by your id enough to go and run and stick your dick in the cheese wheel at the festival, then this is a scenario that really could happen, I guess is what I'm saying. Anyways, thank you for the email. I don't want this to necessarily be a pattern that goes on, but I appreciate all the emails about the fetish stuff. I enjoy it, but I send us can somebody send us like a ghost or a UFO story?
It is fun. Look, sometimes we named our show It Gets Weird. And we were not more specific than that. So sometimes that just means we get to hear about colorful kinks and fetishes and all that kind of stuff. It's fun. I'm into it.
So look, I want to talk about this documentary. I guess that's why we're here.
Yeah, this is a documentary episode, people.
Okay, so we just talked about the alien physiology and sort of general idea of a type of extraterrestrial, an alleged type of extraterrestrial called the Tall White. You mentioned that Charles Hall is the guy who sort of pioneered Tall White science in a sense. And we did that last episode. And we thought, hey, what the hell? There's a documentary from 2020, which is 5 years ago, it turns out.
Long enough for them to make a part 2.
Oh, shit. Are you fucking kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding you. I saw there's supposed, I don't know if it's fully out yet or not, but I believe there is a second part to this documentary, which is, after watching it, baffling.
What could you possibly
What's left on the table there?
Okay. So we watched Walking with the Tall Whites,
Correct.
Which is ostensibly the Charles Hall story, I guess. And this is why I was bringing up ASMR, because if the kind of ASMR that drives you wild is a geriatric rambling over light, stock music, then I have the perfect documentary for you.
Yeah, this is like an elderly smooth jam. It's so, because much unlike a lot of other documentaries you watch, which are a series of different talking heads, experts, experiencers, various things, scientists, etc.
Yeah,
the only person in this documentary other than Charles Hall is his wife for approximately 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all words spoken in this documentary are directly from the mouth of Charles Hall.
And his wife, I will say though, his wife is one of the weirder moments, believe it or not. At least to me.
Yeah. She really, I don't know what to make of her after that short appearance.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because I don't know what to, like, I really thought that I had like a handle on the kind of person involved in all of this stuff with like Charles Hall and everything. After watching this documentary, it's so, the vibe of it is so different.
Yeah. I definitely feel like, so the thing that has struck me with the most immediacy, beyond just the fact, I'm just going to go outright and say it. This shit was so fucking boring.
It's like a 72-minute documentary and it feels like 2 hours.
Oh my fucking God. So your descriptions from our previous episode about these aliens, I don't know whether it's necessarily that they differ, because there are things that he brings up in this documentary that are the same as your description, but I got a very different vibe from how he describes it. And there were also details that I recall you mentioning that aren't brought up in this documentary. So maybe what the next documentary part is just we just get down and dirty. We are talking the biology of tall whites, because they don't hyper focus on it, but it is an aspect of this story.
Yeah.
And it's, so I don't know, the vibes are different. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, it's that was kind of what I was getting at, is like a lot of the facts lined up with what I was reading online in various places. Like there weren't a lot of actual new pieces of information, other than there's like a couple bombs dropped towards the end that are surprising. But really, it's the thing that changed the vibe is hearing it from Charles himself, and also the way that the specific stories are told frame the encounters in a kind of a weirder way. Like, it all sounds so much like your granddad just has his memory jumbled.
Yeah.
Much more in this documentary than it did online. Like, if I were to try to rank, like, talk about how much I believe in the existence of tall whites before and after doing the episode and watching this documentary, I believed in them more before watching this documentary. And the documentary kind of really made it feel like, especially like there was something in our Discord talked about today about like someone finding a source saying that like there were kind of ribs played to new recruits in the military about aliens that like sometimes people just never got corrected. It really kind of feels like Charles Hall got pranked and then it just went way overboard, or suffered trauma in the Vietnam War that just colored the rest of his life.
There was a part of me that was thinking, especially when the Vietnam War stuff was happening, I was thinking to myself, did this guy get Jacob's laddered? And, you know, the thing is, though, I don't feel like we learn enough about the man himself to make really any conclusions about that. There's also the fact that there's this weird mention, these brief mentions that don't get embellished on too deeply, about going under hypnosis among the tall whites and the tall whites collaborating with military, like American military generals. That shit, you know, I've talked about it so many times before now, but how reading these stories in a post Benowitz understanding world for me is like, or just like anything to do with MK Ultra, reading this stuff now, you know, certain things set your alarms off. Like, and we know that there was this like there were these weird experimentation things happening during the Vietnam War as well. So it just, I've been thinking about this because I don't want to try and like some sort of paranoia color all these experiences as being like, well, this is probably some sort of psychological operation or an MK Ultra sub project or whatever, you know. And I also am more inclined maybe to believe the whole prank that didn't get corrected almost type story. But it nonetheless, the inclusion of hypnosis, the military generals taking part in that, and then just, you know, the involvement in the Vietnam War and all that weird stuff. It colors how I read these stories now, I guess. I don't know. I will say, so speaking on not getting enough about the man himself in the way, like, this documentary has a problem that I notice with a lot of these things, where sometimes it kind of feels like this is a documentary about the guy, but also it's a documentary about his experience, but also it's a documentary about what these beings, these aliens are. It just feels a little unfocused in that way. And I don't really think that there is a lot of there's probably not a ton of super interesting material to just make a documentary about Charles Hall, like as a person, his personal life. Like, it's always going to come back to the experiences with the tall whites.
Yeah.
But
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, all I was going to say is that, so that's why it was like, you know, spending 15 minutes talking about being in Vietnam and all his stories surrounding that, or then enlisting in the Air Force, which a thing I noticed is that every time this happened, when he was like enlisting in a different place, he was talking about how the people who were kind of taking him in, all the generals and stuff, were just very impressed with him.
Oh yeah, he was having higher scores than anyone ever has before. Like, there were shades of special little boy syndrome throughout a lot of that early part of the doc.
Well, it just leaves me thinking, man, were all these Vietnam and Air Force stories that lead up into the story of encountering the tall whites for the first time, were you padding 10, 15 minutes onto your documentary to get it to sort of a feature length, time? Like, does that matter? Like, is that something that was on the minds of the people making this? Because we spend a good 15 minutes talking about stuff that happened in Vietnam that, like, I just am not sure what the point is, you know.
Okay, so I have a couple things. One directly responding to that. So this documentary, like you said, it feels very not curious about anything. Yeah. It feels like they just set a camera in front of Charles Hall and let him tell whatever he wanted and then cut the silences out and kind of arranged it. There never seems to be any follow-up to any stories or any questions asked about those stories. It seems like a very incurious documentary in a way that is kind of surprising to me for something like this. It is very just, we're going to let Charles be Charles and, unabridged,
We're going to leave Charles in charge.
Exactly. Charles is in charge of this whole documentary. It's directed by Emil Marczak, but in reality, it's just you could just record Charles and it would be the same thing. Yeah. But in that, it feels like a driving thing for Charles is this concept of controlling fear and controlling panic, because that's a thing that pops up from the early Vietnam stories all the way throughout the entire experiences with the tall whites. There's it feels like he's trying to seed, it feels like this documentary should have been made in kind of as a advertisement for a book or seminar about controlling your fear reactions that Charles runs.
Okay, yeah.
There's this undercurrent throughout the entire thing about the tall whites being very afraid of humanity and having to manage that, and also him having a fear reaction that a lot of times, what's funny is there are more stories in this documentary that just end with, and then I went back and went to sleep, than you would ever expect in alien documentaries. And so there's not a big, he hints at some bigger shit, but he's alternately the most informed person that has had the most experiences with these things, and also just a grunt that people don't really think much of and doesn't have access to anything real. And that, what side of the coin he falls on that varies from story to story, and it all feels very he has such an intentional affable personality on camera, where he's trying to laugh at things and kind of be jovial and charismatic and stuff, but it all feels kind of calculated in a weird way to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And hearing you say the thing about controlling your fear also does make sense, but from my perspective, I was just listening to what he was saying and kind of writing down my thoughts as it happened. So he's talking about serving in Vietnam, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he gets redirected to another base because the guy likes him because he's so impressive. Whatever that has to do with anything.
He's so good at basic training that he got sent to the hardest place to go to.
Yeah, I guess. You can handle yourself, which again, that would, I guess, go back to your controlling your fear thing, because I think that's the implication of handling yourself during Vietnam. But then he proceeds to talk about how he got injured, but it had nothing to do with a fight. In Vietnam, he fell in a hole, and hurt himself. And then he also pretty quickly after that talks about how there is a fight, and he runs from it because if he hadn't, he would have been killed. So it's just okay, what are you? Am I supposed to be getting that you're great at controlling your fear, or what is the message of telling me these stories about how military men are impressed by you, but also you hurt your foot in a hole and ran from a fight? What am I supposed to get from that?
Well, not only did he hurt his foot in a hole, but it needed 13 stitches, right, which he did with no painkillers.
Very brave.
And he couldn't scream because the communists would hear him, and he would rather die than let the communists laugh at him.
He does say he'd rather die before he'd let the communists hear him scream.
This is the thing. All of his stories are about being entertaining, not about being a consistent character. The character of Charles Hall across all these different stories is different story to story in how he reacts to things, but he's always I almost want to rewatch it and just count the times he says some variation on the term controlling fear, controlling panic, because it is in almost every other story. There's some moment where he has to like keep his cool, or he doesn't keep his cool and he should have, or whatever else. And it's like a motif for him throughout this entire fucking documentary in this kind of strange way that feels like it's very rehearsed. I mean, he's told these stories a million times because he did the UFO circuit, but like it comes off like he's trying to make you not ask too many questions because he's so likable.
Yeah, I guess. He's the kind of personality in UFOs and alien stuff where he has almost an authority aura. You know, he gets to say he had this military experience. And UFO people love authority. And especially if that authority can tell you that there's an alien race visiting the planet. So I guess maybe in a sense, all that, everything you just laid out could also make sense if like he is sort of trying to sell himself as an authority on this particular kind of alien, since he was the one who met them and worked with them and got to tell the story first, in a sense. But I also, I gotta say though, like I found all of the Vietnam, all the buildup to the alien stuff, it was just insanely boring. I don't want to downplay the horrors of the Vietnam War by saying that in any way, but because he even tells a story about how he discovered a guy who had shrapnel rip off half his face, and you're like, oh, that's fucked up, man.
That story is wild because it's all about him being in a guard tower and a mortar goes off and a guy just falls down, and he's immediately an enemy soldier who he can see clearly directly in front of him on the ground in front of this tower, falls down into a water face down. And he's like, and I thought he was just playing a little prank, and I thought he was not actually dead. I thought he was fine and he was just doing a joke. So I was laughing at him. And then after it was done, I went down and started nudging him with my foot and my boot, and he wasn't turning over. And then I turned him over and half his face was gone. And it's like, it's such this weird mix of your granddad telling you a funny story and like these horrific things that it's such a weird dissonance in that section. Like that story is so weird, and I don't know what to do with it.
I hate to say, I think he's just kind of got boomer Vietnam vet, like I don't know. I really don't know what to make of him. I don't fully trust his, so I want to read, I guess where I'm at is I want to read what I can find about this guy now, because I want to get a clearer picture of his whole shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because I think he has multiple books now. Like he does. It has continued, and there are like 5 books, and now like a second documentary. This guy has put in some time, so there's got to be more weird shit to find out about him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I was also, this is a total aside, but I'm just anytime Vietnam comes up in something like this, I just am always struck by the fact that you'd think a moment like the Vietnam War would have completely shattered the sort of illusions propping up U.S. hegemony. You know, like. There's something, and I wanted to like get a better read on his ideology, like his political beliefs, because I got I wanted to know what that side of him was like, because the documentary almost makes him feel a little like this weird neutralness, like he doesn't put off much. For somebody who's trying to say that he's this charismatic authority on tall whites, he doesn't really have a personality.
it's there is this kind of weird kind of vacancy to him that doesn't.
I don't know whether maybe it's because he's just old, like there is sort of a thing that happens when some people, when they get older, I've experienced this many times firsthand where like you kind of stop having, I don't know I don't know how to describe it, but I can say, that whole thing about like, I don't know what pornography it is, but I know it when I see it or whatever. Mm-hmm. I know the Charles Hall type of elderliness when I see it, but I don't know whether I could, describe it to you. So yeah. I don't know.
He's very weird.
He is.
It's there. Do you want to talk about his wife for a second, or do you want to? I
mean, yeah, we can. We can't. Yeah, you know what? Maybe we should just talk about his wife because she's not in it very long, and then everything else has to do with the tall whites.
Yeah.
So yeah, the story of his wife. Her name is Marie Therese Hall, and this story is bizarre. So do you want me to just explain?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So Mary Therese is talking about, when she's introduced, she just talks about how she met Charles, which is she met him at a bar dancing. She had initially not wanted to go with her friend to this bar. It wasn't her scene or whatever. And she's
tall and no one wants to dance with her.
Right. She's tall and doesn't normally get asked to dance by people. And she goes out to a bar and her friend's like, "Oh, this guy here wants to dance with you." And, that surprises her. And she says that she shortens her name. She tends to she's dancing with Charles, and he's asking her he's asking her about her name. And she says, "I'm Mary Therese, but people call me MT, and my name's MT Rice." And she tells him, "I'm looking for a man named Patty so that I can be MT Rice Patty." Which is very funny.
Yeah, which is such a good joke.
And what does he say to her, Niall?
He says, "Well, how about MT Rice Hall?"
Yeah,
because I'm Charles Hall.
Would you like to be an MT Hall?
Yeah, and he then like almost immediately is like asking her to marry him.
Yeah, she says that he immediately asks to marry her, and that's insane.
Yeah, well, because God told him that they were going to get married,
and so so this is the part that was so weird to me. Is like you said, she's sort of saying, "Well, my initial reaction was no, I just met you." And then she says that he tells her, "God told me you'd be my wife." And 5 months later, they're married. And that's just how you did it back in the 60s, right? You went and said, "Oh, I have a prophetic vision that you and I will be married and have 6 children together." It just was truly strange because Mary Therese, she kind of gets emotional when she says, "God told me you'd be my wife." And this is why I want to know more about his personal beliefs about life and the world, because there is a God angle here that does not really get talked about. And I would assume that this angle would also play into the tall white experience in some way, how he views it. Or so, I guess that's not necessarily true, but like the existence of extraterrestrials, it's a big question if you're a God-fearing man, right? And what that means for you, I guess, and for God and whatever. But I'm just curious. It's very yeah, it's just very weird, and they they are, I guess, happily married, but I'm curious, like, God told me you'd be my wife is such an out-of-pocket thing to me, and it's so weird that it seems to have worked here.
I feel like that was a thing that people said more shit like that, 50 years ago, when Christianity was closer to closer to a dominating force. Now it still is a dominant force in America.
Kind of dominating
but
force
it's
now.
It's changed. Because it's less populist, it's become more dominant in a political fashion, and that's a reactionary thing that is a whole other thing that we're not going to get into on this podcast. But yeah, she then jumps from the story of them meeting and I guess getting married 5 months later to like jumping like 18 years into the future when he talks about writing this book and she's like convincing him to publish it.
Okay, well, I want to point out two things.
Okay, yeah.
So let me just say, she also has this weird moment where I can't remember what it is. They're out somewhere where they hear younger people expressing anti-war sentiment. Mm-hmm. And Charles has this moment where MT describes him as looking morose, and she's like assuming it's about the war. And she checks up on him and he says, in response to these kids who are being anti-war in one way or another, he goes, they don't know what it's like. They don't understand. They can't possibly understand. They weren't there. Again, a little glimpse that makes me wish I knew more about what he believes. But to your point about the book, about him writing this memoir that he wants to give to his kids, I love the way that was introduced, because she says, I walk in on him in the computer room. And I love it, the two most beautiful words in the English language, computer room.
Okay, real quick, sorry.
Yeah.
The thing about that protesters thing that really weirded me out was he not only was like morose and said what you said, but turns out he was morose about alien encounters, not about the war.
Right,
like,
right.
They don't know what they're talking about. Wasn't about like the horrors of war. It was about the horror, him seeing aliens. Because after he got married, he finally told her that he believed that he had seen aliens. And like she took it weirdly in stride, but you think that that's what, like, all of these things are framed as like your granddad's cool old war stories that you're kind of bored by, but
it's about aliens.
It's about aliens.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Well, that's a good point. And I guess I miss my notes. I didn't actually include that in my notes, but you're right.
So in the computer room,
the computer room, which I love that. I used to have a computer room.
Same.
In my family's house. But she says that she walks in on him and he quickly covers up the computer. And this was he definitely wasn't looking at anything weird. He wasn't Googling tall, white, big breasts, naked boobs, or anything like
cheese
that.
Transformation.
Yeah, cheese transformation. Yeah. He wasn't looking at anything like that. He's writing a memoir, whatever. He probably was. I mean, I know he was writing a book at one point, but I'm saying in that moment, was he looking at the cheese, tall, white, transformation, big boobs, naked breast?
Oh, or he was active on DeviantArt. He was a fucking turbo user.
Yeah. And now you see, oh my God, you know what's infuriating when you look up Nordics and tall, white stuff online is all of the images search has been dominated by shitty AI pictures.
Of course.
So you don't get to have the beautiful textures of somebody's hand-drawn or hand-painted Nordic or tall white alien. It's a shame. I mean, you can, but you got to do a little more digging. So, she convinces him to publish his memoirs, which I don't know. Do you think that he not only has multiple books, but he goes to events and signs stuff and talks to fans, I guess?
Yeah.
Whenever I hear that with somebody like this, is that stuff paying for your life? Like,
she says that he was basically unemployed when this book thing was going down. So once he started to do those things, I do believe he started hitting those things after the book published in like 2002. So he wasn't involved in that stuff earlier, as far as I'm aware.
Right.
And so like the whole you got to publish it. That whole story just really feels put on to me.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
You were writing these memoirs for your kids, and then your wife finds out about them 18 years after you started writing them.
Yeah.
And is like, no, these are so good. You got to publish them. Hey, you're so talented. When like it feels like he had been unemployed for a while and decided to try to, work
Pivot.
on his alien.
Yeah.
book.
But the thing is, whenever I hear, I'm going, oh, you know what is a great idea? I'm going to write a book about my experience with aliens. I hear that and I go, oh, nice. So some walking around money. How are you going to pay your rent? How are you going to pay your mortgage or whatever? Like that's a nice way to make $200. Like I guess I just don't see it as being a lucrative thing. But I guess
that's kind of why I kept waiting for him to like pivot to his motivational stuff, like the controlling fear thing. I kept waiting for him to try to sell something in this documentary, and to his credit, he didn't.
He didn't. He does. It doesn't sell you anything, but it does show you how fun it is to go up and listen to him and talk to him and meet him.
Yeah. Well, he used to be able to talk for like 3 or 4 days without losing his breath, but now
he can't do it. So might not be a chance to catch him at a convention or whatever these days. So yeah, that's the detour with his wife. They do at one point show them walking into a church.
Yeah.
But other than that, she just isn't in this document. Other than all the things we just described, she's not present for this.
Yeah, she appears for, I don't know, a total of 5 or 6 minutes, and then otherwise we're just back to Charles. It's just rambling.
Charles just droning on and on. So let's also. I couldn't remember. Maybe you'll remember. At one point, he ends up after Vietnam. He ends up in the Air Force at Lackland Air Force Base, and that was like, I heard a little alarm go off in the back of my head. That, if I remember correctly, Lackland might have some UFO stuff related to it.
I believe so.
It also might have some of that CIA stink on it too. I think. I can't remember. I can't get all these fucking base names. I can't remember which one's which. But anyways, he's at Lackland at one point. And let's talk about the alien stuff, because that's what we're really here for. And that's actually
the meat of it.
This is partly why I was getting so frustrated with this documentary. Is just like, oh my God, we're talking about Vietnam so much. Can we talk about what the documentary is titled about?
Yeah, we gotta talk about Range 4 Harry.
Yeah, that was weird as fuck. Because at one point he's being told, so apparently people on the base, as I understand it. Also, there's the weird ass sorry, I just remembered there's the weird story about how he's at a military dance and an older woman comes up to dance with him and asks him for a dance, and he says, "No, you're old." Basically.
Yeah. And it turns out that was the major's wife. This is one of those things that is one of those, he has this, I think he modeled some of his shtick after Forrest Gump. I'm not even kidding. Because there's this kind of aw shucksness to a lot of it.
Bumbling.
That is like, because here is the major story.
Yeah.
It was his first day at this base. He just got transferred, and they normally don't allow everyone to go to these. They don't have these things, but there was a birthday party that day.
Right.
And he got to go to the birthday party. And as he was kind of spending time at the birthday party, an older woman comes up and asks him to dance. He says, "No, thank you. You're too old for me." She storms off. He then finds out from his commander that is the wife of the major of the base.
Yeah.
And so you better not expect to get any promotions because you just got on the major's bad side. Fast forward like a day, and the major talks to him directly and is like, "You're actually the only person I can trust with my wife, because everyone else always wants to dance with her and is getting kind of fresh with my wife. But you've proven you're trustworthy, so you're like my favorite boy now."
Yeah.
And that's the story.
Now,
it's this weird, like, oh, I committed a faux pas, but it actually turned out to be the best thing I could have done, over and over throughout his stories.
You are so right. This man is the Forrest Gump of aliens.
Yeah.
100%.
It feels modeled in that way. I truly, the more I think about it, the more that feels true.
It almost gives off this sense, now that you're talking about it this way, it's recontextualizing this, where it's like my old-fashioned way of life just happens to lead me in the right direction. It is, you're 100. That is so funny. So, anyways, that was just a story that I wanted to mention because I thought it was stupid.
Yeah, but like that story leads to him finally doing the stuff that gets us to the aliens, which starts with these series of weather shacks.
Right.
That he has been he's been assigned to. Basically, his job is go back and forth between these weather shacks on some sort of interval to take readings and document them and send them to over the radio to some fucking place for data.
And you could really snappily explain that the way you just did in the documentary, but because it's Charles Hall in charge, he gives just enough detail to make it about as boring as possible to describe this stuff. So it's working on these weather shacks that somebody tells him, somebody working on the base tells him a rumor about a radioactive horse that's white and floats around named Range 4 Harry. So it's this horse out on Range 4. I guess, is the implication that Range 4 Harry was near a nuclear test site and maybe absorbed radiation and became a weird thing?
That was kind of my guess, a kind of irradiated horse. However, as we will find out, Range 4 Harry is not a horse.
Yeah.
I don't really know where the horse part came from. But that's the thing they use to scare new recruits effectively when they show up is to talk about this fucking radioactive horse running around one of the test sites. But we eventually find out that Range 4 Harry is just one of these tall whites.
Yeah.
That seems to be either in charge in some way or just kind of a custodial type figure, because he's always just kind of watching and kind of keeping tabs on people. And if someone tries to get too close to the tall whites, he kind of stands menacingly and keeps an eye on them and tries to keep them apart. So he seems to be kind of a ringleader in some form or
something.
fashion.
Yeah, he's important in some way. There before he even starts seeing anything, though, he seeing the tall whites, he starts noticing floating lights, and that he describes them as lights that would be out there floating while he was, doing weather shack bullshit. And they float in a way that you would imagine a helicopter would, but they don't make sound like a helicopter should. So that's interesting, I suppose. But the first encounter he has is with the tall white lady with a weapon.
Yeah.
He sees this woman by the barracks she's tall, she's a very white lady. And this is, again, like you mentioned before, he sees it, thinks it's a dream, and he's just like, well, I'm going back to bed because I don't know what this is, and I'm not fucking with it.
It seems like he basically woke up, went to the bathroom, saw a scary white lady standing at the edge of the barracks, and was like, probably should go back to bed. And that's the end of the story. Literally, that is the end of the story. Yeah. And that is the level of this is the level of importance with which he delivers it. It is, all of these are very aw shucksy.
Yeah, exactly. And but when he finally does meet fucking Future Force Larry or whatever, Range 4 Harry, he he's out on a day that he describes as idyllic, out in the desert. And he sees in the sagebrush what appears to him to be a little girl. So he's like, oh, well, there's a lost girl out here. What the hell? But he says that her skin is chalk white. And he goes to sort of investigate. And he describes how he's hearing all these meadowlark sounds and shrieks from them. And they all suddenly fly away. And it's eerie. Again, the fear comes in again. But he's able to sort of control it in the moment. And then the little girl stops, notices him, and is watching him. And then I think, does he say something to the effect of he realizes in this moment that there's something about the little girl that's not quite human.
Yeah.
And that's so when the fear really takes over.
Yeah, he loses control of his fear and starts to go back the way he came. And he keeps really talking about how there's this like brush on either side of the trail he was going on.
So much about brush and meadowlarks. Oh, fuck.
Yeah. And like we do get it. Like the path has brush on either side of it, but he really hammers that point home. But then eventually he's kind of making his way back to the one of these weather shacks, and he's kind of worried that the girl is following him, kind of. But eventually he like not runs into physically, but comes across Range 4 Harry, who kind of like intimidates him. He doesn't talk at this point, but eventually he, like this is the weird thing. He sets up Range 4 Harry here as this like silent guardian of the desert who makes sure that the humans don't interact with the tall whites and kind of is this scary presence. And then like 30 minutes later in the documentary, he recounts a time where he made a phone call and Range 4 Harry was imitating a human voice and telling him to go back to bed, like he's being handled by him. It's like this. It's very strange.
It is
how the lack of internal consistency in these things. You know,
the intercepted telephone call also makes Harry sound a bit more chill and jokey, reassuring. But yeah, when he's around here, he's intimidating. And I guess the story we're supposed to sort of get from this is that they don't know what to think of him yet. But by the time he's sort of a little more entrenched with the tall whites, it's, I guess less. But he insists at the same time that it's always tense with them, no matter what. Which we'll get to that, but
they're always on the edge of killing you, effectively.
Yeah. Something I wanted to also point out is that when he talks about Range 4 Harry, you get a silhouette of a like crowned elven figure whenever he talks about him, and
like fucking Saruman in the flashback battle scene.
Yeah, I look at it and I was like, oh, this could be the silhouette of a Lord of the Rings character for sure. It's very weird. And when he has this early interaction with Harry, they like sort of communicate because the woman's there too, right? And she seems to be trying to do something or want something. And Charles talks about how he makes eye contact with Range 4 Harry, and through sort of body language and facial expression, they both express back to each other, I don't know what she wants.
And told in the way of like, oh, my wife, the nag, laughing. Like it's there's like this weird fucking women, right?
So right?
Kind of vibe to it that is it's so weird. Like this documentary is at the same time so boring, but also like if you dig into half of these details, my brain just like vibrates.
Can't quite comprehend.
So many things don't make fucking sense.
Yeah. So there's like a bunch of situations where Range 4 Harry just keeps showing up and peeking at Charles from places around the base, and Charles gets really scared. This is the part where I like, again, alerts going off in my brain. Harry at one point points a squarish instrument at Charles's temple, which hypnotizes him. And he felt compelled to take orders and do stuff, but he could remember all of it. And he got this impression that they didn't want him to remember that much of it. And this is, again, maybe a little bit of special little boy syndrome coming out, where it's like, I was the special boy who resisted the memory wipe almost.
Yep.
But I find it also strange that it's just like we get no details about what this hypnotic device is other than it's squarish. That means
is that different than the sonic screwdriver thing that I was talking about, or is it the same thing? Is there like a switch for like hypnotism and like murder? And if you have it flipped to the wrong setting, you're just going to neutralize somebody?
Set phasers to kill. It doesn't. Yeah. I just wish I maybe in one of his books he talks a little more in detail about the hypnotic device, because I want to know what that is. Is it alien looking? Does it look like something they've procured from humans? Because there is a whole thing about the humans and the tall whites sort of trading a little bit within certain confines, like certain rules are seem to be set about.
Yeah, they won't give us fucking warp engines.
Yeah, but they'll give us some stuff, including maybe bus transport to other planets.
Yeah, we might have like 10 colonized planets that just dropped in the last 10 minutes of this documentary.
That was my favorite part.
He just randomly is like these. God, okay. So the tall whites need a hotter climate. They don't do so well when it's cooler, and there are these other planets that are Earth-like in somewhat near space, within like 10 light years or whatever the fuck it is. And there are these series of planets that they tried to build bases on, but it wasn't good for them. So they're like, we'll just give you these planets if you build us an interstellar base on them, but you can do whatever you want with the rest of the planets. And there was like this quibbling over the quote buses that are like the vehicles that will transfer people to and from those planets to colonize them. And like, you know, we wanted to have control and access over some of these buses so that we have the technology. But of course, that's like the thing they decided they wouldn't give us. So they wanted to keep control over them. But then he basically was just like, that was really all I ever heard of it. I don't know where it went with that. But I doubt that the U.S. government would let it go over just a transportation issue. And that's the end of the fucking story.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like, the idea is very funny to me because it all stems from him being somehow clued into these talks between the government and the tall whites, which, by the way, it's at the point in the story, not when he's talking about the buses, but when he's starting to see Range 4 Harry more often, that he's like starting to realize that the military and the government seem to be working with them. And he, like, I'm trying to remember his exact wording, but it was basically, they'll help us as far as they want, and we would help them as far as we could. So there's limits to what they're willing to do with us. But Charles makes it sound like we have a deal to take a bus with a tall white guide to Earth-like planets in our solar system. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that idea. It's honestly, so as far as, there's so much in this to me that is like, yeah, I've heard it before. I hadn't heard the details of like a fun military alien collab plan like that before, where it's like, oh, you want to colonize these planets? Well, tell you what, you can do that, but you also need to set up these bases for us so that we can refuel when we need to, when we're in deep space. It was just a very funny idea that I really loved, that I hadn't heard before.
It's so, there's no pacing to these things. These stories just take as long as they take, and they're in some semblance of an order, although there are times throughout it that you can tell they stopped one part of it and then played the rest of it later on in the documentary. Like, there's some weird kind of like, why was that edited that way moments that you'll find if you're, you know, paying attention to those things. But it just is like a series of loosely kind of connected vignettes. So okay, the various aliens that we hear about in this, we have Range 4 Harry, who seems to be some sort of upper kind of like, but not a commander, because we also hear about the tall white commanders who are a separate people. But then we have the woman who scared him while he was shitting, and who he for some reason knows as her niece, the little girl that he followed.
Yes.
In that first story. And then there's also the teacher who may or may is the teacher. The teacher's not the mom, right? The teacher's not the woman. Those are two separate beings.
I thought the teacher was the mom, but I might be wrong.
They might be the same person.
I just have the description of her here, which is, you know, the helmet and suit, she floats, and she has human-like features, but, you know, he says stuff like smaller ears and eyes than you'd expect, platinum white hair, white skin. That's what I have on the teacher. And there's also this little bit that right before his wife comes on, he talks about how he sings when he's scared. And so at one point, the tall whites are like, you can... I want to get into the tension thing in a minute, because one of their things is that Charles is allowed to sing when they're present to sort of give them the signal that they can approach him. But there's a part where you get to hear Charles sing. He has a very bad singing voice. And he immediately follows that up by saying, not in these words, but he starts to describe the sort of intersubjective corroboration of experiences for humans to understand the world, right? Like you see that there, and if you also see it, then like we understand what we're seeing in a way, intuitively almost. And so he, like I said, he doesn't use those terms, but he says that to back up his and say that this experience was real, I guess.
Because he keeps, when he talks about the alien experiences early on, he keeps thinking, oh, there's just like something going on in my brain. I'm dreaming, I'm hallucinating, yada, yada, yada. And then over time, he starts to talk about those things about how like the one is like the teacher is out when he's looking at this reading thing in a tower, and he's placing a phone call or whatever, and sees her out there, and the light reflects off of her clothing and like blinds him for a second, and that pain was real, therefore the clothing she was wearing was real, therefore she was real, therefore aliens are real. And it's this like, so he's kind of reverse logicking himself after he already has had like 6 alien experiences.
It like so many things, and this is a common thing I think in documentaries about alien experiences and whatnot, where they just kind of say a thing and then they don't talk about it. So one of the things that gets mentioned around this time is there's a couple things actually I want to bring up. So he says something about how somebody asks him, are the aliens that much like us, or are they smart enough to put on a sort of facsimile, a mask, if you will, that will keep us calmer because it's more human-like? And this question is just not answered. It's just posed. You just are like, are they actually human-like, or is it's something that they're doing to make us think that they're human-like? And then we also he just launches into the fact that he's also met greys and aliens that he calls Norwegians with 24 teeth, which... I'm sorry, to go out and be like, yeah, I met the tall whites, yeah, I met the Roswell Greys, and yes, I met the Norwegians with 24 teeth. It sounds, it's schizophrenic. Like it's very strange. And he's met them all, and all of them are not dissimilar to humans in many ways, apparently. So, what that means.
It's such a good question, because at some point he's kind of talking about the tall whites, but he keeps kind of comparing them to other alien races that he's seen. But there's not like a clear delineation, this, then that. It just is this kind of jumble of stuff. And I honestly do not know what he was attributing to what alien race exactly throughout those different things. That section was just kind of gobbledygook to me. In a way that I was following almost everything in this documentary. It's not hard to follow, but there it just seems like he keeps interrupting himself to talk about a different thing, and I lost track of what the fuck he was trying to get me to understand.
Well, I don't know if he is trying to get you to understand. This is just Charles telling the facts as he sees them.
This is just Pappy telling stories.
So let's talk about the fact that it's always tense meeting the tall whites. So this is a thing that he brings up where he's like, the story starts with him talking about how these tall whites show up one day with a human American colonel. And they're like, hey, Charles, bud, we're going to hypnotize you now, okay? But he says that the aliens are always well armed, even if you're their friends. That if you were to make any misstep towards them, they would have no qualms with just riddling you with alien bullets, basically. Like if you tried to hurt them, they'll just wipe you out. No questions asked. And he says meeting them is always tense. And so he describes this sort of sort of animal-like, sort of like hesitant meetings where you can sort of picture an animal that's like eyeing you and doesn't know what to make of you, slowly comes closer. That's sort of their relationship because it's always tense, even though they're your friends.
You have to try really hard not to spook the animal because the animal, when frightened, will lash out. That is his kind of it. He doesn't say that. That is me, but I think that is the best way to explain how he talks about these aliens, who he also will just like offhandedly mention that they don't understand why we like animals so much because on their planet, they basically, much like an animal, got spooked and murdered all of the beings that weren't them. And so but it doesn't matter because they eat vegetables. They're vegetarians.
I loved that part. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, so it's just like he gives this kind of mammalian quality to them where you have to approach them like a horse, you know, where like you're in vision and you're moving slowly and deliberately and keeping your arms like where they can see them and everything.
Mm-hmm. And you have to sing 50s, big band songs.
Yeah. So it's a very strange thing because he describes the whole. Eventually, we got this process where if I saw one while I was out and about, I would just start yelling and singing and making noise to alert them of my presence, and I would stop moving, and then they could move to their level of comfort to me. And if they got too close for my comfort, I could move away, and we both understood that we were finding the level of comfort with which we could be in proximity with each other in this very strange like level of kind of consent of boundaries in a weird way that was like, I was very, it was interesting. Like that's an interesting way to go about it. But I was very confused by that.
The other thing that this made me laugh out loud, where 10 minutes earlier in the documentary, before they talk about like them being plant eaters and they wiped out animals and stuff, they don't care about animals. Somebody at a thing, I think, asks him like, he's listing off stuff that people tend to ask him when they meet him about the aliens. Sometimes it's tech specifics, but he casually says so that, do the aliens care if we save the whales?
Yeah.
Fast forward 10 minutes and they're talking about the plant eating and stuff. And Charles it cuts to him and he just goes, the aliens don't care about the whales.
Yeah.
It was very funny. And he says like these things, this is them sort of exploring why the tall whites have this sort of hesitancy and fear about humans. And there's a number of reasons, but they bring up how aliens, when they're here, if something were to happen to them, they can't really call for help, I guess. Whereas a human can just reach another human and say, help me. But the aliens, if they get stung by a bee, they'll just die because they don't have that assistance standing by, I guess.
And also these aliens are specifically very fragile. And like he was saying, if they get stung by a bee, they need immediate medical attention because they're just not built for that kind of like assault on their body systems. And so like that's part of why they're so cautious, is because they are very frail. And so like if that you could kill one of these things very easily if you got the jump on them.
Yeah, but all of this tension is in service of trying to collaborate with humans. They want to work with us on something vague, and we want to learn from them and hopefully get some technology from them too. There's a whole scene where Charles is showing how to turn on a diesel engine. Like they're watching him to learn how to do that. But he has to sort of move slowly and with a sort of deliberation to not spook them as he does stuff like that. So that's the kind of thing they're learning from us, I guess. what learning about there is this whole. I was going to say what learning about turning on this engine could even possibly give the tall whites is a little confusing to me. But there is this whole part about how they need help with their transportation usually. Like they'll have engine failure or something like that. And there's stuff that they can get from us to help them fix that. And so that's where the exchange takes place. It's very, I don't know. There's a really long section about transportation and how their craft work. And it's honestly so boring. And he details like what the home planets are and what their distances are approximately, and how the kind of travel that they take necessitates this spheroid craft. And he keeps going back to this whole thing about how they need to remove inertia to travel through space. But I gotta say, the entire 10-15 minute section about how they travel and how far they are and what their planets are like is insanely boring.
Yeah, and especially for the fact that I cannot find an actual claim to what he thinks their home planet is outside of they have some significance with Arcturus, which is not mentioned in this documentary. He gives like a basic star system that is around the distance away that it seems like they came from by the way of their crafts coming to Earth or whatever. You know, he talks about like angles on the horizon and shit. Which also gets in this whole thing about their ships needing to know their ship captains needing to know the phases of the moon so that their takeoff doesn't get fucked up. It's so convoluted and unnecessary.
My eyes
and weird.
Glazed the fuck over at this part. I couldn't tell you what happened in that other than you don't want to fly in between the moon and Earth. Whatever. Who cares? That part I was like, why are we? It's like. I was annoyed up front about how long we were talking about stuff that doesn't really seem to matter to the story with Vietnam and whatnot. And then it's like, yeah, we're talking about why the aliens don't travel between. They're very concerned with the phases of the moon because it affects their travel. I'm like, who fucking cares? I don't care.
Just like there's like two more little things that I would touch on.
There's some things we need to touch. Yes.
One being they ask him about the Tic Tac footage.
Yes.
Of which he gives a very non-answer.
That shit. The Tic Tac footage needs to go away. But he does say, this to me looks like a tall white ship. This is what they would fly. Which is exactly what you would expect him to say. Yeah. But that goes on to further corroborate his sightings, right, now? Because
for sure.
Hard evidence.
Well, because he assumes that they would still be around because they've been here since 5000 BC. And so why would they be gone now? But I love because like that, it feels like at the end, someone finally asked him a question, which was like, so why haven't you heard from the tall whites in 40 years or 50 years, whatever?
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
It's because he's old and sucks now. That's it. He literally just says, I'm old and they don't talk to me.
They have no reason to talk to me. Back then, they had a reason to talk to me because I was on the base and he was a special little boy. And now he's an old man. And so if he's open to talking to him, hey, my line's free. Call me anytime if you need me. Call me, beat me if you want to reach me. But they won't.
And they won't. The other thing, though, is that he says that at one point the tall whites were given Indian Springs base by the government.
Yes.
This is also spoken about in associated with the collaboration between the government and the military and these aliens and what they want. But this also goes on to show that he made mention of particular spots around this base way before Google even existed. But if you go on Google Maps, you can find satellite images of those locations, and they all have weird 3 clusters of dots. And he says those are places where tall whites landed their scout craft to try and set up a spot that they can hang out because it most closely resembles their planet's temperate zone. Yeah. So we have proof. This is proof that the tall whites have landed on Earth in these locations, and they're probably still here. And something that I thought was really funny too is like in between this stuff, Charles just casually mentions, "I'm in bad health." It's just brought up. I'm not doing well. And then
I'm pretty sure he died in like 2021.
I think he's still alive.
Oh,
really?
Is he?
Is he dead? Hang on. Charles
find out.
Hall death. Let's give it a quick Google. I don't think so.
I might be mistaken.
I think let's see if his Wikipedia says is.
Yeah.
Charles Hall. Wait, hang on. Yeah. Charles Hall.
Okay, cool. Never mind. He's alive.
Charles Hall is a former United States Air Force weather observer. So notably, it does not say was. He seems to still be alive, unless this just hasn't been updated and he died at some point. And people were just like, I don't need to update the Wikipedia. So I'm going to assume he's alive. Did we cover all the shit that they talk about? Because like one of the last sort of hints of the documentary is like a very mild disclosure nod, which he says, Charles is like, oh, people are being acclimated to the existence of aliens and our collaboration with them. And so we'll find out eventually. So of course you got to do that. Here's the thing that you have to do in every single UFO and alien related piece of media or documentary in the current era. You have to do the tic-tacs. You have to do disclosure.
Yep.
It doesn't lean as hard into the disclosure as I would have expected, which was kind of nice because that shit's really annoying. Mm-hmm. But it's there. It's like very, very mildly there.
Yeah, he manages to glance over that and the privatization of space in approximately 30 seconds.
Yes.
And that's the end. Like that's as far as it goes. It's pretty wild.
So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that would be worth talking, because I think that's everything. I think that's about everything. You do not have to watch this documentary. This was, I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it's like
a little bit.
We boiled down his boring bullshit into a way more, I think, digestible episode of a podcast that you don't even have to watch. You can just put it on while you're doing other stuff. So
yeah, honestly, here's what I would say.
Yeah,
go and like watch like 5 minutes out of the middle of it once he starts talking about aliens to get the vibe that we're talking about, and then just listen to this episode.
Yeah,
because that will be a more entertaining use of your time. I can't say that I regret watching it because it's kind of fascinating, but it's also only fascinating in a very specific way that is not indicative of its quality.
Yeah. No, so I completely agree.
I can't with in like good conscience be like, this is really, really worth your time, but there is an interest to it for a specific kind of person.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I honestly, I would give a pretty similar review, but what's hanging in the balance here for me is just how insanely boring it is.
Yeah,
it is just unbelievably boring.
He's also kind of hard to understand at times. Like he's got the old man voice where it starts to slur together a little bit. So there are times where like he's really quiet and hard to understand. But that's not like a huge issue. It just is one of those things that you come across when you watch these things.
Yeah.
So
I can't believe there's a second one of these. I can't even imagine.
I forget what it's called. I think it literally is just like more walking with tall whites or something. Like it's
a jog with the tall whites.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was walking with the tall whites. I mean, I'm happy that I know more. I'm happy I can put a face to a name. I want to know more about the guy, but I want to explore less boring avenues to learn about him. And see if I can get a better picture, because while it is focused on talking about him as a person a little bit and his experiences, I feel like I still don't have a full picture. You know what I mean?
You only have the picture he presents to you. You don't have anyone else's idea of this man, and that's what would be interesting.
Yeah, except for his wife.
Reflections on him,
and that 5 minutes was weird as hell. So who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe there's something. There's something.
Maybe
else
his wife will be in the second doc more.
Yeah, we'll see. So who is this documentary for? And can we give our funny little review? I will tell you exactly who this documentary is for. This documentary is for the deeply entrenched alien brain rot people who are deeply invested in the existence of aliens that work with us and are here. There is a very specific flavor of that type of person that I think would be into this. I think it's New Age adjacent or some spiritual adjacent thing. That would be who it would be for. Or it's for a really old people who want to hear this other old person tell a weird story. That's who it's for. And then it's for you and me, sort of. Not really. Yeah, but no. But yeah, I guess. Yeah. Kind of. I don't know. Kind of. And my review is me. Fuck your documentary.
Yeah, kind of a sleepy utterance.
So boring. It's so boring.
So I will kind of just agree with your who it's for. It's for people who are either way too into this shit that they're gonna be hanging on every word, or people who have exhausted. Like if you've exhausted Ancient Aliens, maybe give this a shot as background noise. But like it's not gonna be the best time. And my rating would be documentary. Long and not really worth the journey.
Trying to join you on that a little
bit. Yeah, I appreciate it. Added to it.
Cool. Well, can we say we'll probably never watch part 2?
Yeah, it's called Walking with the Tall Whites Aftermath. So I don't know what that means.
Yeah, we did a little bit of stretching. Came out in 2024.
Yeah, I might comb through it at some point if it's free, but if I have to pay money for it, then no.
If I can up its speed by at least 1.5 times, then maybe I'll watch it.
Yeah,
Anyways,
you want to take care of business?
Yeah, let's take care of some business.
All right. So if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're almost certainly there.
You can find us on Blue Sky at It Gets Weird. That's one fun place you can find us. You can find us on twitch.tv/itgetsweird. I have the end of this month has been crazy busy, so I haven't been doing the streaming thing lately, but we'll be getting back to it next month for sure. So give us a follow there. I usually play games with friend of the show Colin, and it's a lot of fun. Email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. I do appreciate the latest fetish emails, but maybe mix it up is all I'm asking for right now. Send us a story. Send us your thoughts on an episode. Send us whatever the hell you want. Just make it interesting. Make it funny. Make it good. And we might read it on the show. Just let us know how we should address you, and we will probably read your email out on the show. However, most important thing, patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $1 tier, a $2 tier, and a $5 tier. $1 tier is the tip tier. You're just saying, hey, thanks for doing what you do. Here's $1. At the $2 tier, you get It Gets Weird TV, a bonus show, where Niall and I are right now going through season 3 of The X-Files. Maybe my favorite season. It might be. And it's going to be a blast, and we're going to discuss it. So that's what you get. You get a bonus show at the $2 tier. At the $5 tier, you get another bonus show called World of Weird, where Niall and I talk about whatever the hell we want to talk about. And I must say, I had a lot of fun on our last episode discussing all kinds of stuff. We were talking, you're not going to believe this, we were talking basketball and wrestling for half that fucking thing. And it was a lot of fun. But whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday on your own private Patreon feed. And you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out chatting with our listeners about all kinds of stuff from the world of weird. And you have a massive back catalog of bonus episodes. So please, we really, really appreciate the support from all our Patreon donors. You're all fantastic. We really appreciate it. But we could always use more. We could always use more out there. So please check it out if you can. If you can't, though, maybe money's tight. Go ahead. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies. Tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for continuing to support the show. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle signing off.
Peace.